Hello, and welcome to Twin Study After Dark. I'm your host, Sallie, joined by my co-host, Katie. We're identical twin sisters. We invite you to join us as we investigate our similarities and differences in all things life has to offer. Hello, and welcome to Twin Study After Dark. This is a study break today, and we have a special guest here to join us. We have Miss Dr. Mala.
Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Hi, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're very excited
Nice
to have you. Yes. So she is a psychologist, professor, motivational speaker, doula, holistic specialist, providing coaching and wellness services for continued evolution and growth. Welcome, Dr. Mala. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.
So I probably missed some things because you truly do it all. I just was looking at your website in awe. But would you like to just introduce yourself to our listeners and kind of say what you've been working on or who you are?
Yeah. Well, I usually try to work on a lot of things at the same time. My motto has always been keep more than one door open at the same time, so that you can just diversify your approach to everything,
Love it.
So what I have going on, yeah, thank you. So what I have going on right now, I do a lot of my own coaching and consulting. I love to spread the word with just psychoeducation, education tools, things like that, motivating people, of course, as you mentioned and said. But also, I'm the editor in chief at recovery.com, where we focus on building in content and media that's relevant to the recovery space. And that's very fulfilling as well. And I also do some volunteer work. In particular, I work with a group called It's a Military Life, where I get to kind of feed and fuel the support of military members and their families, veterans and their families, and through the programming that we do at IML. So I do a lot of different things. And then aside from that, of course, I'm a mother and a wife, and I have 4 children at home. We homeschool our kids, so I'm kind of the active principal at home for them,
Wow, that's so
whether they like it or
impressive.
not. So,
Very impressive. Yes.
so that's everything that I've got going on. Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, everything you have going on is like life-changing for someone. So you do it all, truly.
Yeah.
Also, I'm also part of the 4 Kid Club. So, woo, 4 Kid Club.
Nice. Yeah. That's
Oh, that's
awesome. That's
awesome.
awesome.
Well, no, originally when I looked at your information, I was really interested to have you on because I saw that you were a doula. I saw that you talked about integrating Western psychology with Eastern philosophy and just talking about like well-being, holistic well-being. And I just, during these times, especially post-pandemic, I know that Katie and I have both dealt with some anxiety, some depression, and I think a lot of mamas can relate out there. But I was just gonna kind of ask you, in terms of your doula work, how did you get into that?
Oh, yeah. So interestingly enough, I was living in Alaska at the time, and it's very just Alaska in general is just such a beautifully zen environment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes on there that really facilitates and fuels that holistic way of living. And I was excited because that was something that was formative in the earlier parts of my career as well, before being holistic and taking integrative approaches was even a thing. I had to kind of advocate for it. So being in Alaska just like really made sense for me and for the family. And I knew I wanted to get involved with the birthing process and supporting moms and dads alike, both prenatally and during the actual delivery, as well as postnatally. So I thought, well, the easiest way to kind of integrate my career path and that world was by becoming a doula. And I went through the coursework, and I did all the trainings, and I did everything. It was really easy for me because there's so much that overlaps.
Yeah.
And it was very rewarding. So that's how I got into it, and then have just been doing it ever since. And One thing that I'm a huge advocate for that isn't really prominently, you know, focused on, I would say, is supporting both mom and dad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work, of course, that goes into mom and, the delivery process itself and preparation for, but oftentimes dads either will choose to shy away or they think that they don't count or they're neglected, and so I think it's really important to ensure that they're part of the process and also, that they can feel like they can ask for support as they need it. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much because I just think in terms of like the dads, like my husband, I gave birth to one child. Three of mine are adopted, so their birth mom gave birth. But I just think
Mhm.
he always was like, "What do you need to feel better? Like, how are you feeling?" It is a lot about the
Sure.
mom, as it should be. But
Mhm.
I don't think he ever had check-ins with himself, and I
I
truly
don't think that doctors
Sure.
necessarily checked in with the
no.
partner as well, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
So
huge.
what does that look like? Like what I guess how can women include their partner more in that process? Is there something that you do
Oh, sure.
specifically?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, one of the things that I always work on with my people is making sure that if dad's in the picture, that dad is included either individually or together, in joint sessions or both, depending on
Mhm.
what the couple prefers. So, there needs to be some equity in that support and at least being able to offer, that support is really, really important within the unit though, like between husband wife or partners. I think it's always important to just engage in authentic communication,
Mhm.
being able to make the check-ins part of the regular day to day. I always advocate for talk time whether you're expecting or not, and a minimum of at least 5 minutes of talk time. 10 minutes is great, but that talk time gives you that connective piece where you can be like, hey hun, how you doing, are you okay, is there any concern or question about anything, and you just have that opportunity to engage in rigorous and authentic honesty and communication. And that's the launching pad, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just have one more question for our listeners that don't really know the difference between a doula or, just your doctor. What would be the difference a doula makes
Mhm.
in the whole journey?
Sure. So a doula is not technically always a doctor, right? Like my PhD is in psychology, so that's related, but not, in the realm of giving birth, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, a doula is truly an advocate. She or he is the person who, or they is the person who is essentially supporting mom and or dad to go through the process and advocate for decisions and choices and support the decision making process, not make it for them, but support the decision making process, and also to be there to guide the birthing process as it's happening as well. That's how I like to define it. So we
Mhm.
are equipped with, tools and techniques to help you through that entire birthing process. But, you know, you can have a doula with, alongside your medical practitioner, a nurse midwife, a midwife, anyone who you choose to actually birth your child, um, to basically help support the entire environment. So that's how I like to think about it. Now, the other part of this is just like you would be going to your regular prenatal appointments, instead of just focusing on checking in on the baby, we're doing a really holistic view of checking in on mom and dad or partners, and basically making sure that everyone is feeling good, feeling prepared, and talking through the emotional components that are involved with becoming a new parent. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then postnatally, The really cool thing that we can do also is continue that support, continue helping the couple understand, the adjustments postnatally. And if there's any like support needed, whether it's during the day or during the night, that can also be something that a doula helps with. Now, postpartum depression is a real thing, and it's a real thing for both moms and dads. And I can't emphasize that enough. So,
Yeah, interesting.
that's another, component that can be helped, not just through the means of a doula, but also through, of course, mental health services that I strongly advocate. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that you say that. I just remember when after I gave birth, you go to the doctor and they basically give you a form and it's like, "Have you been happy lately?" Or it's like five
Yep.
questions. And for me personally, I was like lying to myself. Like, even if I would have like thought I was being
Mhm.
honest at the time, I was like lying to myself. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And I just can
Mhm.
imagine just having a doula with you throughout the whole experience, like being pregnant, giving birth. You would just be at more of a safe space that might be like, hey, Sal, you seem a little down today. Like, what's going on? You know? And maybe I'd be
Yeah.
more honest
Yeah.
about it. I can definitely see
Yeah.
the benefits of having a doula in that regard. Um, but also the dad, I didn't
Yeah.
know
The
And
dad.
dad
it's
component, I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it takes time, for everybody to bond with the newborn, for sure. And everybody is on their own kind of timeline. There's no really true defined, bonding period, right? We see in the literature, they say on average, men will bond within 6 months or by the 6 month mark. I've seen that in so many different variations. Like, that's great as a guideline, but I wouldn't, live by it, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Again, because I've seen so much, I've seen dads instantly bond. I've seen dads take a minute to bond. I've seen dads bond in 3 months, so like
Yeah.
there's variation. And I've seen moms go through the same thing too, so
Mhm.
the thing that impacts it, of course, are all of the various changes that are going on. Mom's definitely going to go through it because there's very clear and distinct neurochemical and chemical issues that are going on. But dad is also in that environment, partners in that environment. They themselves already walked in with, whatever was pre-existing potentially,
Yeah.
and are learning how to adjust as well. And those required adjustments are going to end up leading you to having some imbalances potentially, right?
Yeah.
So just the fact that we have to do that, like could have postpartum depression implications, and does,
Yeah.
so postpartum depression for men is, you know, real. It
Mhm.
happens. The symptoms will unravel, similarly, and also unique to each individual, but
Mhm.
they could be related to just the postpartum issue, right?
Yeah.
And if there are any pre-existing, concerns or propensities that could exacerbate it, that needs to be taken into consideration as well. So I would say that men are, and men and partners are just as prone to postpartum depression as women are. And again, like I said at the beginning, I advocate for that continued care for both.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like a lot of people, I didn't know that. And I think
Yeah,
a lot of people need to hear that. And maybe some men are going to feel validated hearing that,
sure.
you know? So thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, you talked about a holistic approach to health and mental wellness. What does that look like? What does the
Mhm.
holistic approach umbrella cover?
Yeah, sure. So, when we say holistic, we're looking at the whole person. We're really taking into consideration from a psychological perspective what we would call and what's known as the biopsychosocial kind of overview of a person. I like to break that down to biopsychosocial spiritual, and also whatever else is relevant to the individual, right? And maybe it doesn't fall into those four categories. Maybe there are some other ones. to which there are beautiful ways of being able to look at one's life from that holistic view. So you want to pay attention to things like everything, like, family, culture of not only the family but also ethnicity, and the culture of the society that the person was up in. And then also, hobbies and likes and interests and things like that. So I mean, really, holistic views include everything that would fall into that biopsychosocial, spiritual perspective, and any subsets of that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that kind of answers my other question because Katie and I are identical genetically. I was going to
Uh-huh.
ask you about
Uh-huh.
that because at different times in our life, we've gone to therapy and we've had Katie's been told she has ADHD. I've never been told, but I struggle with anxiety. I take medication for it. She doesn't. And I'm like, but we're genetically the same. But when you talk about holistic well-being, just the other factors or things that could come into play, is that kind of why
For
that's so
sure.
beneficial?
Yeah. 100%. Like, twin studies are so beneficial in our world, for sure, because it has shown, that while there are similarities, it's very important to take into consideration those other factors, those other variables that may alter or switch or change up what's being presented, that departs from the genetic makeup. So one thing, even just as an example, even outside of a twin study, we always say, and now in the medical community and medical research, we see it. It's like, just because you're predisposed to certain genetic propensities doesn't mean that that has sealed your fate, right? There are lots of different things that we can do to work around it, work through, those presentations and those propensities, just as much as we can allow ourselves to fall into them, right? So yeah, it's good to know, it's good to know what your genetic makeup is, what the genetic similarities are, like between the two of you or between twins, but it doesn't have to be the only thing. Doesn't mean that that's just set in stone. The environment, how you guys perceive things, how people perceive things, and how they interpret things makes a difference as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that's so interesting because, yeah, I'm sure you've worked with twins before, but our perception of our childhood
Is different.
so different.
We remember it differently.
Yeah,
Even though we were raised in the same home,
Yeah.
our memories are totally different.
yeah.
But I was also going to say
That's so
what's interesting. Yeah, right? We when we grew up, there wasn't in our home a lot of awareness of mental health. Like, my mom was learning about it as we were having experiences with needing to get information. Our older sister has borderline personality disorder, among some other things. But for us as children, we were little, we just thought, oh, she's just mean. Like, we didn't know anything about mental health.
Yeah.
And my mom would be reading books, but we were just kids, so it didn't make sense to us. How do you have an open conversation with young children about what might be going on in your home?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I'm glad that you asked it. Yeah. It, really being able to bring awareness to mental health with children starts with, again, what I said at the beginning, is just have the conversation. Checking in and asking, how are you doing, is such a powerful tool, that's the starting ground.
Yeah.
If we have little things like Elmo, I think there was a meme or a Twitter post that happened where Elmo came up and said, how's everyone doing? Just ask that question. And it went viral, and the
Yeah.
responses were really interesting because, basically everyone was coming back saying, actually, I'm not so great, and some people were like, yeah, I'm great, but the point
Yeah.
is it started the conversation, and it was reflective of the fact that we don't really remember that even those types of simple check-ins, right, are not only the starting ground for healthy mental health conversation or just starting and having a mental health conversation, but don't happen enough. You know,
Right.
we're so busy, especially in the United States, we're so work centric. We're very go, 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 go. Success is typically measured by, how much you're completing and, how many objectives and KPIs you're
Yeah.
making and hitting and, all that stuff. What's our revenue? But really, what is our work life balance? Like, how are we measuring that? And I will say, now that was me poo pooing a few things, but, I will say that COVID, and the, the forced kind of like, we have to be at home situation
Yeah.
started to shed light on the need for that balance in a way that I'm very thankful for because, quite frankly, we needed it as a society.
Yeah.
And my hope is that that only continues to get better. So I'm very proud of the millennials who are really defending that work-life balance aspect. And my hope is that that's going to change, for the better. We're going to continue to evolve in this work-life balance realm. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
I hope
hope
that answers your
so.
question. I know I went on a
I
little bit
hope
of a
so. I
tangent.
think no,
No.
I loved it because I agree. I've seen since the shutdown, since COVID began, more people taking like a noon therapist call, and like
Yep. Mhm.
carving out some time to check in with themselves. And I
Yep.
think that Gen Z too. I have a lot of younger people that work at the company I work for, and they're more strict about
Mhm.
their boundaries, like what they're
Mhm.
willing to do. And I admire it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
when I started
Yeah.
working, I was like just so happy to have a job. I was willing to do whatever. And now I can look at that and be like, that is not healthy at
Same.
all.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. I mean, I have been at companies and environments where leadership has been like, "Oh, you're lucky to have, that flexibility, that hybrid approach." And this is like as COVID was happening essentially. Um
Hmm.
and and it was so unfortunate. One of my other specialties is business psychology and IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology. And so what we do, just as a really top level view summary of that profession, like we focus on how the systems are working and what is and isn't, beneficial for the leadership as well as those who are working for the leadership. And it was so unfortunate to see that in that company, as this leader was essentially saying, "Oh, you guys are so lucky," the rest of the people, all of the workers were like, not really. This is becoming standard. So
Hmm.
this should be
Yeah.
included, kind of a thing. And it was really lowering morale. So I think, again, and I'm thankful for, this new world that we're, evolving into and the newer startups that are really focusing on trying to maintain that work life balance and understanding that part of the expectations of working familially bound, even non familially bound individual
Hmm.
requires that balance in order to even produce anything in a good way.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how it evolves and how it grows.
Yeah. I don't want to, you have just so many expertise
I
that I'm
know. I
like,
love
we
it.
have to, because I really want to learn about too. You do a lot with helping military veterans. So could you explain some
Yeah.
ways that,
Mhm.
because, and how did you get into that? Does have you had military impact your life specifically? I'm just curious about that as well.
Sure, yeah. No direct impact at all. It just was a community that I was naturally pulled into. I think, coming right out of college, fresh out of college and, fresh new license and doing all the practicing and stuff, like I ended up with some active duty and veteran individuals. And that just piqued my interest, because I wanted to be able to serve them well, right? So, coming past those new years of being a practitioner, I was offered a beautiful position in Alaska. That's actually what took me to Alaska, postdoctorate. and I took it immediately because I wanted to be there. And it was working on a military base in Alaska, and probably the best years of my life.
Oh,
It was
wow.
absolutely wonderful. There was a lot of stress. I will not deny that there was a lot of stress, but
Yeah.
the relationships that were built, being able to just be embedded in that community, and be on base and, really see it, live it, and understand it, be able to take it through their eyes, and empathize, like that was priceless. So um, it just reinforced my love for wanting to serve that population. And I have many near and dear friends that, are still a result of that time there. And I'm so thankful for that. And one thing I will say is that being in a community like that too really reinforces the bond of the connections that you make with people, the friendships that you make with people. There is a certain amount of mindfulness that happens, that I think is just really not taken for granted. The relationships are really cherished. So it reinforces mindfulness. It reinforces being present. It reinforces empathy, if you allow it to. And I was very thankful to be in a situation, in an environment, in a workplace that yielded those types of relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
I was gonna, sorry, I keep thinking of things because you're just so interesting.
Katie, just take
so
over the interview. Why don't you?
so,
I'm
but
just
no,
kidding.
but the present factor, right? So like, I had read
Mhm.
somewhere, it's just like one of those quotes you come upon, but it was like, if you're living in the
Mhm.
past, you're depressed. If you're living in the future, you have anxiety type of thing. It was like a blanket statement, but one of those quotes.
Yeah.
So can you explain the importance of living in the present?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's kind of like the cliche saying, right? Like saying of, if you're focusing on the past, well, let me just actually summarize it this way. Um, if you're focusing on the past, or if you're focusing on the future, those are both things that you can't really do anything with right now, right?
Hmm.
Now, it's important to understand, you know, what you felt from the past and what's happened and what you want in the future. But if you dwell in either of those spaces, you're letting go of the time that you have right now in the present.
Hmm.
So there's this thing, let me tell you about one of my terms. One of my terms is toxic perseveration. So perseveration is when you just keep looping around in the same thought process and you don't let it go and it just keeps happening in your mind, right?
Hmm.
I've added toxic to that. I mean, that in and of itself implies that it's not a great thing, right? When you're perseverating on something, but toxic perseveration is going beyond like the I want a candy cane, I want a candy cane kind of mentality. This is about the stuff that you are harping on that is literally stopping your ability to function, right?
Yeah.
It's literally stopping your ability to problem solve, right? So, my other saying is, or method, is the AAA method. And the AAA method is where you acknowledge what it is that is frustrating you, that's a problem that you want, right? That's bugging you. Then you acknowledge what it is that you actually want, the thing that you're yearning for, right? And then you action plan to that. So it acknowledges the past, it acknowledges what it is that you're wanting, right? And it gives you the space to not perseverate, right? But to action plan and problem solve. And sometimes that first step in your action plan is simply saying, I'm going to get up and take a break and walk and breathe because I can't keep in the same loop. It's not helping me. Right.
Yeah.
So, the
Yeah.
importance of being present minded is to be able to not only cherish what you have right now and what's in front of you right now, that includes the time. So, it's to cherish and best utilize the time that you're in right now, because that's when you can do stuff, right? You can't
Yeah.
rewind the clock and go back. You can't go forward and, like have the little Hermione dial, to go, to make yourself
Right.
go, forward and be able to fix everything. Right. So you got to work with what you've got. And that's what you've got right now is in front of you, the time that you've got in front of you.
Yeah, I saw you laughing. Was it because you were thinking I do that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I also like there is so much forgiveness you have to have with yourself to be able to drop it. Like,
Yeah.
can't go back in time.
Mhm.
Like, I can't change anything. I got to keep looking for solutions to move forward. And like that is
Yeah.
that empathy you have to have with yourself is maybe some of the hardest part of that is like allowing yourself to be like, it's okay.
I was thinking though, like
Yeah.
I said earlier, sometimes I can be a little tinge anxious. If you know me, you might be like, you're more than a tinge. But like I was just thinking when I get excited about something, like right now, I want a farm. And I'm just like, we're gonna buy a farm and we're gonna have land. And like how you said, like you just loop the same thought like over and over. And it really becomes like an obsession with me. Like truly it does. But mine is almost always in the future.
Yeah. It's very
Yeah.
hard for you to stay present.
It's
because
hard
you're-
for me to stay present. Yeah.
I think
There's
that's the
something to be
thing.
said
Yeah.
about visualizing, though. I want to be careful because like visual rehearsal, visual motor rehearsal is especially very, very beneficial. So one thing that I would say is like if you feel like you're obsessing about the farm and it's getting in the way of you being productive, okay, we need to talk. But, and it's giving you anxiety about it. Yeah, sure, we need to talk about that further. But what I would say is great, you're acknowledging that you want this farm. What does that farm look like? How would it feel with you being on your farm and playing with your animals and having the kiddos run around? Like what would your day-to-day look like? Envisioning that is not a bad thing, right? Because then what you're doing is you're identifying what it is that you want. But now I want you to push yourself one step further and be like, okay, what are the steps I need to take to actually get there? Right? So that you're not just stuck on, I want a farm.
Yeah, but then you feel
Right?
hopeless. Like,
Right.
where is it? Or like, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's good. That's good. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. That's that toxic perseveration. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mean by toxic. Like that's when it becomes toxic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to make action steps so that it becomes something that's
Mm-hmm.
attainable. That's awesome. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask your opinion as a psychologist, kind of on your opinion about forgiveness. We talked about this in a podcast, maybe I don't know how many episodes ago, but when we were raised,
Mm-hmm.
we were taught you forgive everyone, you move forward, you keep them around,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really an option to like be like, no, I'm going to set a boundary. If they're treating me this way, I'm not going to put up with it. What is your opinion when people come to you and they're
Sure.
like, I should forgive them because they're my mom or
Especially
my dad?
with family, it's
Yeah,
hard.
family.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is an interesting thing. And the first thing I would say about forgiveness is that it's not about the other person. It's actually about you giving yourself a break.
I think I agree with you in terms of forgiveness being more for yourself. I like that you define it as kind of giving yourself a break because that's even a different definition than I had of forgiveness. Like in my mind, we were a Christian upbringing. I was like, you have to like love them and like them and basically let them off the hook for everything they've done. And that's why I think I always had trouble being like, I can't forgive. I don't know how to forgive people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that you shared that. And I want to dive into that more too. My saying on forgiveness is that forgiveness is the bridge to understanding, healing, and peace. It's not about just letting somebody off the hook. It's about freeing yourself so that you can move forward with lightness and with strength. So, really, this isn't a lot of people think that. A lot of people will think if I'm forgiving someone, that means they're off the hook. That's not the case. It just means you're giving yourself the space to heal and to move forward. that doesn't mean you've got to condone other people's bad behaviors or things that might have hurt you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
So,
love that.
so yeah.
I needed to hear that because I've gotten to a place as an adult, you know, we're 35, we have kids, where I'm like, basically I
Mhm.
was like, I can move forward and it's not going to affect me. But I love that I wouldn't even use the word forgiveness because I was thinking I'm not capable of that, you know? And I love that you kind of shared your
Mm.
definition because it makes it something I can teach my kids too, when like they're kind of guiding or
Oh, thank
navigating who
you.
they should surround themselves with and who makes them feel good to
Right.
be around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And now also, I mean, one thing I would say is that when you're able to kind of live and breathe by that definition for yourself and that understanding, that's going to help you model that for them, and they will then pick up from your ability to interpret that in your way and to display and like depict and follow through with what your forgiveness means, what forgiveness means to you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing that. That was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
Katie, do you want to ask a
Thank
question? I
you.
know you have a
Thank
million.
I
you.
know, I know. Well, now I'm like, I am conscious of the time, but I'm like, I do have so many questions. We might need to have you on again
I know.
because I just feel like you're such a wealth of knowledge, and it's really, I would imagine, and this is just me assuming, how hard it must be to be a working professional in what you do, and how do you create
Mhm.
that boundary of where you're not taking on everything, all of the emotions of everybody you speak to on a daily basis,
Ah,
and have your life and your life with your children,
yeah.
how do you create that
Yeah.
boundary?
Well, I'm going to say this. It started with my stellar mentors that I
Mm-hmm.
had, in my collegiate program, my master's and my doctorate. And I love them dearly. I'm forever thankful to them because they taught us very well how to compartmentalize and how to make sure that we weren't taking on other people's burdens as our own. That is a
Mm-hmm.
very common question and also a common risk. You know, I have trained individuals, as you know, I'm a professor as well. So, I've put counselors and therapists out in the field. And one of the things that I try to do is impart what was taught to me, which is that art of being able to compartmentalize. And that's where we need to, because if we were taking on everybody's issues and burdens, then we would crash and burn. So
Mm-hmm.
there are things that are really important that as clinicians, as therapists, as coaches, as consultants, that we need to do. And that is, quite frankly, debriefing with people that you trust, that are in the field, that understand the lexicon and the language. And that's going to help immensely. Um, Part of the reason why there's supervision built into most of our mental health professions is so that we can reinforce the idea that debriefing is good and it's necessary and important for being able to be a good provider. um, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent and say one of the things I'm also very passionate about is being a provider to providers, because medical professionals, care professionals of any kind, they are not in an industry or a profession where it's really emphasized or reinforced for them to stop and debrief. Like they have to
Yeah.
carry it all. And
Yeah.
12-hour shifts, it's 15-hour shifts, this, like long shifts, where
Yeah.
they have
Mm-hmm.
no chance to stop in between. And it's bad. That paired with no sleep, their own issues, it just layers on and they're taught to just keep going until
Mm-hmm.
they crash and burn, right?
Yeah.
I think again during COVID we saw it. There were so many professionals across a variety of fields. There were so many you know caring individuals, people who are in the caring professions. So whether you're a family member taking care of another person, whether you're, a nurse or a nurse's aide or a physician's aide, like there are so many different caring professions that just get overlooked. and
Yeah.
they are forced into that whole routine of everything, and they aren't given the chance to actually debrief, and that's bad. So coming back to what I originally said is that the compartmentalization and the processing of it all starts with good debriefing. Now, I would say that as you move along in your career, and certainly as I have moved along in mine, there have always been people that I've been able to lean on, for support, but that has also gotten less and less just because of the different environments that I'm in. Myself,
Mm-hmm.
I am more administrative now. And it's interesting that being in more of a program development administrative kind of mindset and role, it puts you in more of an executive position. I've held executive positions, and it reinforces for me the idea that it doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you're on, whether you're the person who is delivering the one-on-one service or whether you're the person who's in an executive leadership position, you still need to debrief. You still
Yeah.
need to make sure you maintain boundaries so that you're not taking it all on and taking it home. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so that also goes back to that work-life balance that's so important to maintain. And that, of course, leads me to say you have to have healthy, boundaries to be able to follow through with your own sense of self-care. Not to be cliche, but whatever you're defining as your self-care, that has to happen. And you've got to create non-negotiables. So for me, my non-negotiable is meditation. And meditation kind of checks off a few boxes for me. It's, meant to help with my physical health as well as my emotional health. And it's also something that I want to teach and impart to my children so that they see that from a modeled perspective too, that not only is this a non-negotiable, but it's something that can help across the board, whether you need clarity of mind, whether you're just looking for a break and you need to reinforce your breath work, whether you're trying to debrief from the day. So one of my other sayings is there's literally a meditation for everything that you're experiencing in your life. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Your website, you had so many good tools on it for honestly, like that people could get for free, like all the gratitude journals. And like I wrote down everything. I was like, oh my gosh, date night ideas. The letter of
Yeah.
love you can write to yourself. I was just like, oh my gosh, there's so many good things. I was just going to piggyback
Yeah.
off Katie's question. If you're the type of person who every day you come home from work and you are like debriefing, but vocally to your partner, it to the point where they're like, you need to let this go. Do you have any ideas or you could help us with in terms of like boundary setting so you're not like making that your whole life once you get home?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think it's so easy to fall into that. And again, like, especially in the mental health profession, I am limited with what I can say. I can't really say anything at all to my spouse about my cases, which is again where I go back to, if you are a mental health professional, I've always taught all my students this, you need to have another mental health professional that you can debrief with and work through things. So that's really important. In terms of being the person who's bringing the information home, the easy way of being able to kind of keep a boundary for yourself is thinking about it in terms of summaries, right? So it's like, I'm culpable of this. Okay. I like to run long. Anybody who knows me, when I start writing or when I start telling a story, like I will literally be very, very long and very intricate, or I'll be really succinct and short, right? It's kind of funny. So for me, the exercise started when I did my dissertation, because the dissertation is like a 200 plus page, book essentially that you're writing. And then you finish it and then they say to you, and I've said this to my students as well, great, now summarize it in 5 minutes, and the look on the face. And I remember my look on my face was like, like, no, because you put everything into it. How are you taking 200 pages and summarizing in 5? Well, that's the exercise, so if you look at your day and you think about like the key components of what you've experienced, how would you summarize that? And what would that summary sound like in about a minute to the person that you want to share it with, right? If you're the person who's receiving the information and you're starting to feel overwhelmed, what I really, really suggest there is saying first and foremost that you hear what the other person is saying and expressing, and then being truthful about where you're at. So, for example, you can say, you know what, if it's a spouse situation, you can be like, honey, you know, like, thank you for sharing your day with me. It sounds like you had a lot going on. And what I'm hearing is, and then you give the summary of what you heard. And I really want to dive into that. Do you mind if we take a little bit of a break before we do that? And then we can come back together at like, 5:30, and let's carve out like 10 extra minutes so that we can go over it a little bit more in depth, because I want to be here with you, you know? So
I love that.
asking for that time, and thank you, in a compassionate way becomes really a great way of not only acknowledging that you're hearing the other person, that you care about what they're saying, and that you want to continue to be there for them, is really important. It's reinforcing validation, empathy, all of the things. And then the other person, if I was the other person, if I was the spouse overwhelming, then I can say, thank you so much, honey. That really sounds great. I'm looking forward to 5:30, and let me know if there's anything you want to talk about, because once I'm done, after my 10 minutes, I want to hear about your day, right? So it's being reciprocal, right? I'm reciprocating that gesture so that my spouse feels like they are also heard and also have the space to be able to share.
Yeah.
That was really good advice.
I asked because of you.
Oh, really? No,
Yeah.
seriously? Oh my goodness. So I just have to say, so I work in themed entertainment, and my whole job is coming up with like story behind an attraction, and those are like pages and pages of story, but when you pitch them, it's like pitch it in 3 sentences. So I can do it at work, but then when I leave work, I come home and I just talk and talk and talk forever. And I guess it's like exercise that practice in both sides of life.
I also was thinking it probably also helps you to stay present with like your partner, so you're not just like, you actually get to enjoy your time together.
Yeah,
If you,
exactly.
like,
Right. You're not living in what you worked on all day at home. Right. Yeah. That was great advice.
For sure. And you're setting
Yeah.
limits for you. Yeah. That's good.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask real quick, because I saw that you do work with rehabilitative martial arts and henna. And I wanted to ask, like, who would benefit from those? And can you kind of do a brief explanation of that? Because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, everyone.
Oh, yes.
Everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I am being funny, but I am not lying either. Rehabilitative martial arts is a program that I developed with my husband, who is the martial arts and wellness director, actually, of the company that I run, which is the Synergy Center. And we built that program initially when I started working with individuals who have had TBIs, or traumatic brain injuries. Then we started to realize that this is really good for any type of rehabilitation. And we kind of opened up the program development so that we could cater to different populations needing different types of rehabilitation. So cardiovascular rehabilitation, physical therapy based rehabilitation, and then military members, PTSD, anxiety, stress, things like that. So there's basically, like, you could take the program and you could apply it to these different populations with a few variations. And so that's why I'm saying it really is a program that we've developed that is applicable for all. We also have a wheelchair-based or limited mobility-based program, so that it doesn't matter if you're standing or sitting, you're still engaging and going through the program. And the other one that I'm really proud of too, which kind of combines with all of it, is pain management. Because one thing that I think people might misunderstand is that for effective pain management, you have to have some amount of mobility and movement to heal and to circulate. And so we were able to configure that program also for pain management. So it really is a program that is good for all. The rehabilitative henna program is a program like the martial arts program that can be beneficial for individuals of all walks of life. The only qualifier I would say is that you want to have henna, or you want to drawing or designing. And both rehabilitative martial arts and rehabilitative henna, really is to help with psychomotor coordination, mindfulness, deep breathing, and then again, reinforcing one's ability to have confidence, to increase the self-efficacy of where they're at. So people who are going through rehab oftentimes feel very discouraged, like they can't perform, they're not able to figure things out. And the henna program really focuses on fine motor skills and fine details, right? Because you've seen henna designs, right? So what we go through in that program is teaching the different intricate designs, but combining that with, like I mentioned, psychomotor coordination, cognitive strengthening skills, mindfulness, empathy, deep breathing, so that you can go through a progressive growth in your ability to feel efficacious. Okay. The rehabilitative martial arts program, again, like I said, very psychomotor coordination bound, but combines the same features. So really focuses in on cognitive, frontal lobe, movement based, figuring things out. That's that psychomotor coordination part, but also combining mindfulness, deep breathing, and pacing into the entire program so that you can gain and build that sense of confidence back as you're rehabilitating through whatever it is that you went through.
Oh, that is so cool.
That's beautiful.
I know.
Yeah, very unique and creative to think about.
Yeah.
Alternative ways to help,
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has an art program
Thank
and a
you.
martial arts.
Yeah.
We always say I like the physical stuff and she likes the art. And so we both be working on our own thing.
That's funny.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I truly feel like I could pick your brain forever, but it's almost been an hour. Seriously, though, please come on.
It has been such a joy.
Seriously, I don't want to stop talking. So
No,
lastly,
it's
though,
a pleasure.
I was just going to say, if people are listening to you today on our podcast and they want to reach out to you or they want to go on your website and find your things, I will make sure to put your information in our show notes. But is there anything you'd like them to know on how to find you or anything you want to talk about in terms of your company?
Sure. So yeah, you can find me through my website, which is drmala.net. That basically cross-links to everything that I'm involved in. My social handle is at the official Dr. Mala as well. So you can find me on either of those. The company's name is the Synergy Center, and that also has its own website, which is thesynergycenter.net. So feel free to visit any of those and you'll be able to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put all your contact information in our show notes today. Thank you so much for every answer you gave us. I feel like we really did grow. It was a therapy session for me.
I honestly no, and I just feel like you're just this light and beautiful soul.
I know.
And I feel honored to have spoken with you. Thank you so much.
Really wonderful public speaking.
Yeah.
We say every 2 seconds, and I'm just listening to you. I'm you sound so eloquent. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. Oh,
Thank you.
well, thank
Sallie and
you.
Katie, it's absolutely a pleasure to meet you and to talk with you and spend this time with you. And likewise, I feel that both of you just exude wonderful joy and such peaceful and graceful energy. So thank you for having me on the show. And I'm excited to talk to you again soon.
Yes,
Definitely. Oh my gosh,
absolutely.
we still need to learn so much from you.
Right.
All right. Well, have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you
good
so much.
night.
Have a good night.
All right. You too. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi everyone, it's Sallie. We're going to leave our story there for today and pick up next week on Twin Study After Dark. If you've enjoyed our podcast today, please rate, review, and subscribe. We'll meet again next week for more Twin Studies. Bye.